All right, got my West Coast crew with me. We're going to see what they've got on their mind and everything because they've woken up very early in the morning, but it's only about 10 o'clock here in Durham, North Carolina. It looks like we might be having some thunderstorms later on today, but we'll see if that's the case. And of course, some people are talking about the bombing of a retail store over there in Russia, and of course, the continued wars in between Russia and Ukraine, the continued activities between Israel and Hamas, and now Hezbollah, and of course, a number of other things, including the political landscape and all along those lines. I'm going to bring in my talented folks. Don't have the usual opening that I usually would have, but hey, that's what happens when technology doesn't decide it wants to cooperate and all along those lines. But I've got my good friend Jim Ead with me and Rick Rosner, both of them coming from the West Coast. So I'm going to bring them in and see what they've got on their minds and what's happening in their world, and we'll see who else comes in and joins us as well. So how are you doing, Jim? Hope everything is going well in your world. I know a lot of people are talking about, like you and Sasha do, the world of investments and all along those lines. But hey, we'll see what's going on in the world in investments. And of course, people are talking about the campaigns and what's going on with the campaigns. I've heard some people say that Trump is trying not to win. I've heard some other people say that he's got a good shot of winning. Actually, I was watching last night, or I guess early this morning, one of the shows that Shaquille does out of Australia with a couple of his friends, and they were actually predicting that they didn't understand what Kamala was doing in the sense of not really having a plan in their mind and everything along those lines. And they were saying that he was talking about how she grew up middle class, and that wasn't really a plan. But I know that even Jacoby, when he was here yesterday, talked about the fact that they hadn't really heard much of a plan except for the no tax on tips and some other little surface things from Trump. So we got a big debate. I think that's a week from today, and everything with the vice presidents and everything. So definitely a lot of folks are paying attention to the political landscape. So how are things going in y'all's world?
Well, you'll be surprised to know that I completely disagree with Shaquille.
Yeah, and I'm glad Jim's here because Jim is zen, and I just need everybody to be chill because I had a tachycardia this morning, where that's where you wake up and your heart's going bam, 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 bam. So I don't want to be Fred Sanford all day. Yeah, you just did the Fred Sanford thing.
Yeah, I'm coming, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so just everybody be like, let's not yell at each other too much.
Oh, Rick, I thought you might have gone to the gym already today, so I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's like, but it happens to people. You wake up and you feel all fluttery, and it's not that big a deal, but it feels like a big deal when it's in your chest.
Of course it
does. And Steve actually, Steve had something like that not that long ago, and I'm going to bring Steve into the picture as well because I think Steve had a chance to meet some very important politicians, national politicians, and if I remember correctly, shortly thereafter he had a little bit of a fender bender, and all along those lines, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that correct, Steve? And how are you doing?
I fell running and hit my head and cut off my leg real bad. I'm okay. It's still in pain, but I think my jaw is still a little swollen, but I just came on to say hi to you guys. It's my wife's birthday today, so we're going to be doing some birthday stuff. But I wanted to just open up today, and then after the elections, I'll be coming on more frequently. I've just been juggling a lot of different things with these elections. I'm a surrogate for Stein, who's running for governor. I was joking with him the other day. Let Robinson win a few votes. We don't want him jumping off a bridge or anything.
Wow.
I mean, it could be the largest landslide in North Carolina history. Now they're saying it could be 10, 15 points. I mean, hell, he's going to go in with such a mandate. But I wanted to seriously say that there was a tragedy in North Carolina. A UNC student, Morehead Kane scholar, who my daughter knew, died in South Africa last week, or this week, on a hike. So tragic. We pray for her family. Brooke Chevron, and she was working for Justice Desk Africa. So sad. The other thing is Israel, major attack on Lebanon, killing women and children, and really has me kind of in a just a bind in terms of just even locally. I'm supposed to speak at the Israeli event on October 7th about the Hamas attacks, but really concerned about the United States. I mean, Biden's supposed to address the UN today about it, but I think something has to be said about this brutal killing and malicious killing by the government, by Netanyahu's Israel. And not all Israelis support it, but I think sometimes silence by acceptance, just don't say anything. It's just concerning. And I hope that we can come to through. And then all eyes on the election with the vice president debate next week. We'll see what happens there. I think if Harris wins in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, I think she can win. It's looking good for her in North Carolina, but it's still a tough race, but a lot better than it was a few months ago. So I think my football analogy is it was 4th and long, and looked like the clock was running out, and somehow the ball was fumbled a couple of times by Trump, and now they got the ball, and the Democrats are moving it down the field, and then you got Mark Robinson. So you got like two kind of, interceptions or fumbles that have happened now, and now it's like the ball's moving down the field. Is Trump going to look back and say, "Oh my God, I had this thing in my hands, and look what I did"? So
Trump doesn't seem Trump doesn't seem to be campaigning very hard. He's doing all this crazy side stuff, like he's got a cryptocurrency. He's selling $100 coin. Melania is selling a $600 gold plated medallion. He doesn't seem to be focused on winning over new voters.
Hey, Rick, along those same lines, and that's part of what Shaquille and them were talking about when I watched them this morning on Jamal's show and everything along those lines. They are of the opinion that there's no ground game for Kamala Harris and everything. And I don't know how it is in California, but I know here in North Carolina, she had recruited a lot of volunteers that are out there beating the streets and trying to get votes.
That's not right. She's doing a ton more.
Absolutely.
She fundraised Trump by a factor of 4 in August. She took in 4 times as much money, and she has, in a lot of states, she has twice as many volunteers.
Yeah.
So people saying that she's
I don't know
got
where this
ground game just are underinformed or are bullshitting.
Yeah. And the idea that she's only said that she's from the middle class, that's nonsense too. I don't know where this stuff comes from.
Yeah, her campaign looks to me more like an Obama campaign. That they're being pretty effective and well staffed and the whole freaking thing.
They have all the momentum, and you just go. The polls aren't necessarily indications of how people are going to vote.
Well, let's talk about the polls, because the way they calculate the average kind of annoys me. Because if you look at the average according to 538, whose job it is to average the polls, she's at 2.6% ahead of Trump, which is not enough. But if you just look at the results from the polls that have come in since the 19th over the past 5 days, according to 14 poll results, she's averaging 5 points ahead of Trump. And of course, the national averages don't matter. It's the averages in the swing states. Yeah. But, look at the polls, but don't believe the polls.
Right. But the momentum is clear.
Go ahead,
the momentum is clear. Biden was down, and Harris is pulled slightly ahead. Is it enough? As we saw in the Clinton campaign, she did not target those swing states the way she should have, and it cost her. Harris is targeting those swing states and targeting them hard. So, she might lose Georgia. Who knows how they're going to count the votes in Georgia? She might lose Arizona, but she's doing pretty darn well in the Midwestern states, and the vice president pick was helpful there. And Trump's vice president pick only doubled down on the voters he already had. It wasn't an ad at all. And so it's very likely that Harris will take Nevada. It's very likely that she will take Pennsylvania. North Carolina is in play, which, if you'd asked me going into this race, I wouldn't have said it would be, but it is. And she might pull off Northern California, and their governor candidate, the Republican candidate there, is doing all he can to help Harris and the Democrats.
I want to talk about just the geography of Israel-Lebanon for a second.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So one problem is Israel doesn't mind taking out a few civilians or more than a few in going in.
I got to run. Thank you so much.
All right, Steve.
I'll
try to make this evening at 5. Otherwise, I'll I'll see you on either tomorrow or Thursday.
Happy birthday to your wife.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
happy birthday to wife.
I'll be back tomorrow. All eyes on the elections. Thank you. Bye.
All right. See ya.
So you got a bunch of problems with Gaza and Lebanon and Israel. And one problem is Netanyahu's trying to save his ass by being, pretty killy and just like, and another problem is Hezbollah and Hamas hide out among civilian populations.
They use them as shield.
Another problem is the geography. These are tiny, tiny regions. The U.S.'s southern border with Mexico, 2,000 miles. Northern border with Canada, 2,500 miles. The Israel-Lebanon border, 50 miles. The geography is incredibly cramped. So even if Hezbollah weren't intentionally hiding among civilians, there would still be a ton of collateral deaths because there's just no room to do frickin' anything.
There's no room to move. Coming back to the elections, one of the things that I was concerned about, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about this, is apparently there are several states, I think Georgia is one of them, Florida might be another, definitely Texas, where they are purging several thousand voters and everything. And it seems like they are a lot of the minority community and the young community that are being purged. And I think I heard yesterday that even the state of Montana doesn't even have Ms. Harris on the elections and all along those lines. I don't think that they've got her as a candidate, and there's definitely some pushback on that, and hopefully the Democrats can get that straight. But how concerned are you about, they always talk about on the Republican side, election interference, but, if you're going to purge voters, and if you also got an entire state now, it's a mountainous state in Montana and everything that was going to go.
I read about Montana. And that honestly looks like an easily rectified just glitch instead of some conspiracy, that they left her thing off of an online ballot and just a few people voted in the first day that it was on, and it's been corrected. And the people who voted without her on the ballot have been offered the chance to re-vote, and she's not going to frickin' win Montana anyway. But in the other states, the Republican states where they're trying to F over voters, if you total the number of people who've been purged across all these states, it's more than 1 million. But you can get yourself, it's a pain in the ass, but you can get yourself unpurged. If they knock you off the rolls, then you have to go down and I guess re-register. But you need to do it now, because if you show up at the polls and you haven't checked your voter status,
right,
you could be told that, you've been kicked off the rolls, and then you get pissy and you vote provisionally, and who knows what happens with those votes. And Georgia has a long recent history of effing with voters. Yeah.
And if the Republicans accuse you of something, it's almost certain that they're doing it. And so they are interfering with the election. And they learned a lot from the last time they tried to steal the election in 2020. They learned how to do it better. And I do think that this purging of voters, targeted purging, by the way, just like they targeted mail sorters and mail boxes in Democratic places last time, they're going to do a better job this time of interfering with the election. And the interference, will it tip the scales? That's the question. And in Georgia, it's going to be a fairly close election, and Biden won last time, and this time they probably will tip the scales. So you're going to have to just accept the fact that the GOP is going to cheat. If they cheat in Florida and Texas, it's okay. But cheating in Georgia, that's a problem. Arizona, that would be a problem. North Carolina, that would be a problem. These swing states are really where the focus should be. And right now, I think Harris is doing an excellent job, far better job than Clinton did, and at least as good as Biden did in 2020. So I do think that she's going to win enough of those swing states to win the election. And I think Trump is just going to continue to shoot himself on the foot. So
it might be that all the voter suppression stuff the Republicans are doing are one excuse Trump gives himself to not really campaign hard, because his strategy, he's going to go with his 2020 strategy, which is to claim that he won, regardless
And he
but
won
like,
the debate. He thinks he won the debate. So, you know,
Yeah, he
there's no
thinks
argument with people like that.
So-
you can't argue the man. He thinks he won the debate and everything along those.
let me give
Go ahead,
two
Rick.
examples of voter suppression. In Texas, they didn't do it. I don't know where it is now, but like 5 years ago, Texas decided you can't use your college ID as ID to vote, but you can use your hunting license. Now, your college ID has your picture on it. Your hunting license doesn't even have your, it's just a piece of paper. But so, you know, college students tend to vote, you know, more liberally than people with hunting. But so, and in North Dakota or South Dakota, or it might have been Oklahoma, one of these states that has, you know, a fair number of Native Americans, the state decided you can't, you need a street address to be able to vote. The trouble is on Native American reservations,
Yeah.
no street addresses.
Right.
No treated
Well,
at all.
I was just going to say about, I don't know if you talked about what's going on. What is it, Nebraska, where they're trying to do the same thing? Well, a similar thing where they're trying to steal they're trying to, is it Nebraska or Oklahoma?
Nebraska has a split electoral vote.
Yep. And they're trying to make it an all
or
nothing state.
But I think that failed. I think I read yesterday that it failed.
It did, but they're also trying to push that in Maine. They're also with the electors that are in North Carolina to the head of the election boards. Well, not the head, well, people in the election boards being diehard Trumpers and won't certify the elections and stuff like that.
They learned a lot from 2020.
Yep.
So I mean, the only remedy, the biggest, the most effective remedy is for people who don't like Trump, which is 60% of Americans, to show up and vote our asses off, and for everybody to bug their friends and families and make sure those, you know, everybody's registered, and just show up in enough numbers. Like 2020, 2/3 of all voting age Americans voted for the first time in history. But that was because of COVID, where there were policies in place that made voting fairly easy. Since then, the Republicans have cracked down. And because when voting is easy and more people get to vote, the Republicans lose because they have an unpopular policy.
Yeah, just really quickly, Jacoby, one of the things I was telling the guys earlier that I watched Shaquille and Jamal's show on this morning and everything. It's probably why he's not on, because I just popped in and just saw a minute or two of it and everything. And it was another gentleman that I think also from Australia and everything. But they were talking about the campaign. And one of the things that they tried to say, and I don't know that I agree, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, is that there is an uptick in the Trump support among the black male voters and everything. So have you heard that? And if so, why is that? And what can we do about that? Because that's one of the things that they tried to bring out in their live stream this morning.
So you got to remember that show that you're watching is like Turning Point Australia or whatever, which Turning Point USA is its sister. It's still a right-wing show that's going to propagate a lot of things that, you know, they're going to take a nugget of truth and then change it. That's why Jamal is very conspiracy heavy. If you ever look up into him or look into his background and his history, he's very conspiracy heavy. He did get some other, I mean, nothing against the guy, but he just already has a background heavy laid around right-wing stuff, and he diehard Donald Trump because he had an event that he was planning for Donald Trump Jr. There's a whole bunch of stuff that was about that. But in regards to the black male vote, Trump has a higher percentage of black male votes than other Republicans. So in terms of trying to mask it as he has this giant amount of support in black men, it's untrue. Kamala Harris did garner support, did take away some of the support he had gained when he was going against Biden. There is a split in the black male vote because just like every other race or every other culture, there is a gender discrepancy where males are voting for Trump and more women are voting for Kamala Harris. So even in the Black community, that is an issue, but it's still not something that is so outlandish. I think she's now at what, 80, either 80, 85% or something like that in the Black vote, which normally the Democrat Party gets roughly about 90% of the Black vote.
So let's do the demographic math.
I got
Black
another
voters are about 12, 13% of the electorate, and you're talking about a 5% difference within that. So 1/20th of 13% is 2/3% overall. So it's not insignificant, but it's not something to totally freak out about.
It is actually very significant in the sense that it was Black women who saved the vote in 2020. So it is
that's Black women, and Black women show up in droves.
Yeah, they do.
Yes. Yeah, they might save the day again. But I wanted to say there isn't the kernel of truth to this. It is greatly exaggerated, but the kernel of the truth also is another con by Donald Trump, which is he's associated himself with certain rappers and some Black rappers who feel like the system has targeted them. And so he whines and cries about how the system is, these are all these felonies that I've been accused of and convicted of. This is a political thing. The system is targeting me, and he's getting some sympathy. It's a small fraction of the Black males, but I have talked with them, corresponded with them, and they are leaning towards Trump for that reason. And it's a con. It's another con by the con artist Trump.
And that is his whole campaign, is that and I hate trying to make the comparison or using the, I guess, comparison, because I don't want to take it in the way that it will sound. But the idea of saying a lie loud enough over and over will make it true. That is an old thing from history around a particular war in a particular society that actually use that. But that is actually what Trump does. Regardless of what it is, I won the debate. No, you didn't.
Crowd size.
His crowd. Oh, nobody leads. I got the greatest crowd size. It's bigger than Martin Luther King. No, sir. You don't. Yeah. I mean, even now with him doubling down about Haitians and the Haitian immigrants, and these people are illegal. No, they're legally here. Oh, they're eating cats and dogs. No, they're not. Stop saying it. You're attacking. That's putting a target on all Black people, anybody who looks Haitian. So it's just, he doesn't care. He wants power, and people blindly believe it. And it's infuriating because he's graded on such a scale that, nobody else, like Kamala Harris, oh my gosh, she doesn't answer a question. Well, doggone it, that man was talking about Hannibal Lecter and Johnny Carson, getting on Johnny Carson's show.
And he doesn't answer yes or no questions.
No. He was saying, bring Johnny Carson back, even though Johnny Carson's been dead for 15 years.
Yeah.
So I have some statistics here. Black voters make up 14% of voters, which means they vote at a 10% higher rate than everybody else. But Black women themselves vote at a 10% higher rate than Black men. So Black women are about 7.5% of the electorate, Black men 6.5%.
Okay.
And to what James was talking about bringing these rappers and everything on stage, he doesn't know who these people are. He doesn't care who they are. He brought in New York. He did that one function, and he brought on 2 rappers that had a criminal history of robbing people and killing people. And he just recently he brought that Hispanic, the Puerto Rican rapper on stage or singer on stage. But
thought it was a woman.
Yeah, oh, she's so fine. She's sexy. All this. It's a dude. You don't know who
couldn't even get the gender right. I did have a question about security and all on those lines, and Sasha may have some thoughts around this, and it popped into my head actually this morning and everything. Now, assuming, and hopefully, I think the vast majority of us here hope that this isn't the case and everything. But do we have the risk of another security nightmare should Trump win a second term? And what I'm thinking about is actually something you mentioned, Rick, which is the notion of college and everything. Because I think it's been a minute. Because I don't think the Obama kids, and correct me if I'm wrong and everything, were in college when he was elected and everything. So if and I think Byron is going to college this fall and everything. So if he's elected, won't this be the first time in a long time? Because I think even Amy Carter was in grade school when that was elected. It might have been the Kennedys or somebody like that. The last time that we had a college kid that was a kid while their dad was in the presidency and everything. Because I can't think of one. I was trying to think of one this morning and everything. Because then you've got Ralph and John, the Secret Service, wandering around while the kid is trying to do what you do in college, which is discover yourself.
Yeah, but that's we haven't had it in a while, but it's not unusual. And so it's unusual in that frickin' Barron is like 6'8". So I don't know, Howard, how do you protect a guy whose head sticks out above everybody else's head? Do you have to hire 7-foot Secret Service people? I don't know. I think he'll be okay. He's going to school in New York City, maybe. Let's look him up. But he's still a wild card. We don't know if he's like a Trumpy a-hole or if he's going to be chill, but it'll be fine. And if you want to see movies about that, there are a bunch of fictional movies about the adventures of presidential offspring.
Yeah, just leave him alone.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sasha. You had your hand up.
Okay, I've listened to your discussion. So this is quite obvious that Trump, being a typical con man, his whole campaign is a con because he has no idea of presidency, although he was 4 years elected by accident. He has no policy, he has no plans, he has nothing. His only plan is to avoid jail term. And this is only his motivation to become president. And when people are talking about, oh, he's going to be for a little man or for not so little man or maybe for a big man, or he's only for one man. It's Donald Trump. By the way, his stock today, I noticed it was up 5 cents, the GT. It's at all a year's low. The last time I saw it, it's a joke, ridiculous idiocy because if you walk on the street and you talk, okay, here's a bakery, it's a little cafe. Each of these businesses generate more money than all his setup. Okay, can you imagine that? It's just
Trump University, Trump steaks, Trump vodka, Trump Bibles. It's just one con after another.
Yeah. Now Melania joined this by producing some kind of dolls or some, I don't know what she's doing. She's trying to sell something as well. Maybe he told her, oh, you need money? Make it. Yeah, go and work for the money. So she's involved now in some, because, well, she has to get used to it because when he will be in jail, she has to support. She might as well learn something to do.
The irony, though, because remember how Melania's not there because Laura Loomer's there. Laura Loomer's Donald Trump's love bug right now. But but the funny thing is, with Melania is selling a book, Donald Trump is preaching, J.D. Vance too, preaching how peaceful it was under Donald Trump's time. While in Melania's book, evidently, she talks about all the riots that were going on.
Yeah.
So
and violent crime is down under Biden's administration.
Yes. But murder went down 11.6% year over year, which is the biggest drop in 20 years.
Yeah.
But that goes to the whole idea.
He just lies about it with impunity.
Yeah, that goes to the idea of what they do. They just sit there and lie as much as they can and repeat it. Violent crime is down, but no, they're going to repeat that violent crime is up. Oh, crime has got to, and people are going to believe it. Same thing with J.D. Vance on TV the other day, which I thought it epitomized the whole Republican, well, their ticket, where he went on some TV and held up some eggs, talking about how eggs were $4 now. Oh, you can't buy eggs; they're $4. Well, right behind JD, he's standing in front of the other eggs. The eggs were $2. The ones he was holding, the ones he had were 24 and not 12. And he's complaining that they're $4. And he's like, well, you can't buy 12 eggs for $4. Dude, you're holding 24. Those are $4 eggs. Right behind you, it says they're $2. And people will just blindly ignore that fact and will believe everything coming out of that man's mouth. And that's the scary part.
Yeah, I agree. But I don't think, I think you could fool some of the people all of the time, and Trump is, but I don't think you can fool the majority of Americans twice or three times. And I think he will lose again, because I think that Harris, despite what some people have said on other shows, her favorability rating has gone from this steady as a VP to like this now.
Yeah, because the only reason people disliked her as VP is they just associated her with Biden. There wasn't much of a, people were not going into her record or looking at what she, they just like.
They're getting to know her now, and they like what they see.
Yeah, the only thing that they were trying to get her on was a little bit, and I don't think that's a fair criticism, because that was not her job and everything. They tried to tie her to the border, which is the border to our south and everything along those lines, even though we've got borders to our north as well. But they were trying to tie her to the border, and they were also trying to tie her to some prosecution that she did. I've seen that on some of the Trump ads, where they're trying to tie her to some prosecutions where the people got off and then committed other crimes. It's kind of like what they did with Horton back in the Dukakis race way back when and everything. So there's some of this trying to paint her in a corner.
What I do think is very politically savvy of her is she's not running from those. She actually, the economy was an issue. She put out an economic plan. She actually came out at the debate talking about economics. Every rally she does, she talks about what she's going to do for the economy. She's staying on the issues. For the border, she's actually talking about going down to campaign at the border. So I like the fact that she's not running from these issues. And I think people can appreciate that, because if you hide in a corner, then somebody else gets to label and name like Donald Trump does. But she's not doing that. She's out and about doing.
She's going to debate again.
There are real issues that weigh against her. The border weighs against her. That's hard for her to fight. And then there are bullshit issues that are cited by people who never would have voted for her in the first place, looking for an excuse so they don't just sound like a-holes. And her record as prosecutor is one of those BS reasons.
Yeah, her record for prosecuting hard crime, violent crime, all that kind of thing. She was tough. I'm speaking, from just south of San Francisco, and it was like, the milder crimes, she was more lenient. The things like, that weren't violent, that didn't really cause harm. She could be more lenient with those. And if somebody that committed a drug offense or something like that was released and did another crime, well, the Republicans are going to find that person and make it seem like it's everyone. And it's not. She was very well respected as a prosecutor. But some of the people that didn't like her were progressives, because she was tough.
And she with Oprah, Oprah asked her about guns, and she said she has a gun, and anybody who breaks into her house is going to get shot, which seems a little ridiculous. But she's not going to lose votes for that, because the liberals are going to look past that, and the conservatives might make them be a little bit more okay with her.
Well, I'd like to go back to the border issue too, because the border issue is a global problem. It's not just the United States. What we have is climate change, which is creating situations where lives that were tenable are now untenable, and they are now unable to live where they were, and they're coming to Europe. They're coming to the United States. And Europe, in France, we just had a shift in their government to a far right because of many of these things are because of the immigration problems. You see it in England, you see it in Sweden. You know, it's not just the United States that's suffering from this, and they are suffering it. But Trump has no plan other than declare military state and send troops to the border. And that's really what's going to happen if Trump gets elected. We're going to declare martial law, and they're going to be searching people house to house for proper documentation. Now, this doesn't sound like
your arguments will change a conservative-leaning independent voter's mind.
Yeah, but hold on a second, Sasha. I think a couple of times on this show, you've actually argued for martial law for certain reasons and everything. So, do you think we need to go to martial law? Because I think a couple of times you've argued that with the protesters and other things going on, that you have been a fan of the United States going into martial law. But I don't want to speak for you, but I've heard you say that a couple of times. But you want to clarify those positions.
Yeah, I could clarify it very easily. It needs martial law. U.S. Today, the society is very loose, is very detached from the real issues. They're fighting among each other. There is no sense of unity. And martial law, and especially if it would include or just go into mandatory military service, that could unite the nation. Because I remember my mandatory military service in Soviet Union. What's happened is that for a short period of time, say 2 years, you live in army barracks together with people from all other parts of Soviet Union, nationality-wise and different financial status, although that was less important, but the nationality, religion, if any, because actually all religions were persecuted in the Soviet Union. Nevertheless, people were trying to keep the religious side. And what's happened is that during the 2 years, you were living in the same barracks with all these people, and you were sort of melting into some kind of a unit which experiences the same thing over and over, and you learn by helping each other to go through the exercises or even through the day or so on, and trying to help each other, to defend each other and so on. So that creates some kind of a unity, because then when your army service would be over, and let's say you meet somebody from another nationality, like say Chechen, for example, you meet in some kind of environment and you remember, oh, I was in the army and there were 2, 3, 5, 15 Chechens, and we were all friendly, and I knew them very well, or so on. So that will unite people much more than anything else. So people who are coming from the billionaire house, and those who are coming from a very modest upbringing, and they would live in the same environment and go through the same routines, and they would learn to help each other. So that would unite the nation. Because today, I really don't see anything what would unite the nation at all, unless there would be a war. Now, to get ready for war, you need martial law, because obviously there is a huge infiltration of all American institutions by Russian, or it could be Chinese agencies who are spreading propaganda. And there is no real chance for U.S. to withstand that, simply because they cannot do similar or same thing in Russia, because in Russia they don't have normal means of whether it's Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. There is nothing. So there is absolutely impotent U.S. and the West trying to influence Russian people. It's impossible. But you cannot protect your people from the enemy's propaganda. So this is kind of a dead end right there. So with the martial law, you will immediately arrest all the useful idiots who are spreading Russian propaganda. And by the way, in most cases, they are getting paid. So you just throw them in jail indiscriminately. and rode them for 2, 3, 5 years. Let them hire lawyers who will plead their case that they're innocent, that they were paid, but not so much as you say. No, they were not paid $1 million, only 600,000 and so on. Let them go through that routine and prove their case. And in the meantime, U.S. will be much healthier.
Jacoby than me.
I disagree that we need martial law, because a heavy-handed security ends up hurting minority communities more so than anything. And then on top of that, if you're looking for unity and all the extra stuff that could help. So on the martial law thing, think about it. And also mandatory military service, for example, and this is not a slight against you, Sasha, so please don't take it that way. But remember, you did the mandatory military service in the Soviet Union, but right now you're on our side hating Russia. So the mandatory military service didn't force you, I guess, still have that same unity towards country as you do back then. So there is still a separation, and it still creates a problem within that mandatory military service. What would be nice is less heavy-handed of the of security and more of the things to help as a small analogy that can be expressed out. One of our focuses in our country, and we take the prison system for example, we don't focus on recidivism. We don't focus on stopping recidivism. We focus on the monetary value gained by that individual in that prison system. So if we actually work on ways to put in education, some ways to work people into society that have committed a crime or had an issue in their past that threw them in there, from, okay, maybe they lived in a low income family, mom and dad weren't around, but they're stuck in a system where they're going to their best friend's house, their best friend ends up, no, how do we set that child up for success and not say, okay, well, he's going to end up here, so let's go ahead and make money off of him, throw him into a boarding school, throw him into all this stuff where he ends up back in jail in the system, and that recidivism is a problem. That is where our focus is in society as a whole. Everything has a dollar value associated with it. So we forget about ways to incorporate and work with each other and think about how much this individual is going to cost. How much is this going to be a payment towards, it's going to be an expense to help out undocumented immigrants to get the legal services that they need to get their immigration papers. I don't want to pay for that. The undocumented immigrant is, they don't deserve health care. Well, if you're worried about, they're bringing disease, let's have them have some basic health care, so therefore they can actually live a life, so they can provide resources and everything else to society. So we think about this dollar value so bad, we forget about humanity and everything else to bring everybody together.
All right, Americans won't stand for a draft. The last draft we had ran from 1940, the beginning of World War II, ended in 1973 at the end of the Vietnam War. If you're going to do something like that, it's going to have to be some kind of workfare program for national service, which could be good, where you enter the military, or you enter some other public, Teach for America, build housing, whatever. For each year you do that, you get paid a low but livable wage of like $30,000, and on top of it, you get another $25,000 to spend either on college or on a down payment for a home. But without giving people, it has to be more carrot than stick. We're a lot more selfish than we were during World War II. The threats seem a lot less dire. Unless frickin' Russia starts spreading across, Western Europe, we're not going to have a draft.
Hey, Jim, just really quickly, one thing I'm curious about, and you might have some thoughts about that, and Rick, you just brought it up. What exactly is a livable wage? Because a lot of times I think about that, and I think that there are a number of people that are living way underneath their means and are probably underpaid and underemployed, or sometimes working multiple jobs and all along those lines. So I'm trying to figure out, when our politicians talk about a livable wage. 'Cause I've heard some people throw out the figure of like 50 to 60,000. I know there are a number of people that aren't making even that kind of money these days. So, what is your idea of what a
It
livable
depends on
wage
whether
is in the year 2024?
It depends on whether you have housing or not. We know since COVID, we have the highest rates of adult kids living with their parents. And so if you're doing that and you're not paying much in the way of rent, you can get by on a crap job, that pays you, I don't know, $15, $18 an hour. But if you have to provide for your own housing, especially if you're in a big city like LA or New York, where a decent apartment's going to run you over $2,000 a month, then you need to be making, I don't know, at least $25, $30 an hour.
And the idea of a living wage has to be taken into account with the cost of living. And the cost of living, like my dad was, when I was very young, he was a high school teacher. He later became a college professor, but he was a high school teacher. He had his home, he had 2 cars, and he raised 4 kids on a high school teacher's salary. That's not possible now. We went into this, back in the 70s and 80s, you learned that you had to have dual incomes. So the idea of a woman staying at home raising kids became more distant in the past because you had to have 2 wage earners to make it. And it's only gotten worse. So the cost of living has increased. And Rick is right. Housing costs have soared. I don't know how people get started in the San Francisco Bay Area now because it's impossible to rent, let alone to own a home, unless you are making a very comfortable salary. So this has forced people to move back in with their parents and that sort of thing. It's not the same. When people my age, my generation, some of them say, well, we had to get a small place and cram ourselves in, and they can do that today. It's not the same. It's a different problem today. They're facing a different problem. The cost of living is way through the roof compared to when I was a kid's age. When I was getting started, it was possible for me and my roommate to have a 2-bedroom apartment when I first moved to California, on minimal salaries. So, we was just getting started and we could afford it. It's not true today.
So, and 10% of California college students are housing insecure. They're either, couch surfing, living in their cars. I would guess that there are, tens of thousands of college students who are trading companionship for housing, that they're hooked up with somebody that they can tolerate, but it's not they're in relationships where they get to live with somebody, and so that's what where the person might kind of suck, but they have a place to live.
But that was going on even before the pandemic, because I know Jacoby is aware of this, just like I am as well, that there was the infamous case of the Duke University student that made her living as a porn star while attending Duke University, a very expensive school, and all along those lines. And last time I checked, I think she had actually gone into a regular, more mainstream job, but that's actually how she got through school until she got outed by the folks at Duke University that saw her, and all along those lines. And that was about 6 or 7 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly.
There are 1.1 million people selling their wares on OnlyFans. It's about this. There are as many porn models in the U.S. now as there are doctors, and even more than there are cops.
Well, people go where the money is because things are expensive. I mean, heck, you can go way back. Chubb Rock, one of the rappers of old school, he paid for his way to be a doctor by rapping. You gotta, if you
provided judge,
yeah, so people go where the money is.
You look at a lot of female rappers were strippers, and
And there are nurses, there are doctors, there are teachers, and everybody else that'll go into these positions because these positions really don't get paid as much as we think they are.
They
Nurses
deserve to be paid.
need to have raises. Teachers need to have raises. Police, fire, all of our services need to have raises, but we're so focused on everything else. And then it gets back to what I was saying. There's a dollar value on this person's head. I don't want to pay for that dollar value is what the most of the society says. This is why teachers don't get raises, is because, hey, we shouldn't be paying for that. We should be paying for all this extra stuff for schools. And no.
I have to do a shout out against martial law again, because, martial law requires a highly centralized top-down autocratic system. And when America was founded on a completely different principle. And even though, we lack unity today, there's no arguing that we're a very highly divided country. But the idea, the people that study these types of things found that societies that were well governed and well organized and doing well had a rapid descent when the government changed and someone who didn't represent the society's norms took control. And what I read was that this is what Donald Trump represents: someone who doesn't value the norms of our society, the principles of the founding of America. And these types of things lead to a rapid descent. And what we saw under the first Trump administration was a rapid descent of our respect for one another, a rapid rise in hate talk, hate speech. Jews will not replace us became something that didn't appall people anymore. So these are the types of things. But under dictatorships, the descent was always lower, because it was highly centralized and authoritarian. Now, that's one reason why highly centralized authoritarian societies exist, and exist more so than democracies. Democracies are messy. They're hard to deal with. But as long as we have leaders that represent us well, then the society will respond. And this is what we need. It's desperate to have someone who has decency, as Kamala Harris does, and is not indecent the way Trump is. And the society will respond to another Trump administration, and it will not be pretty.
But the last time we had unity was right after 9/11, when Bush's America pulled together. Bush's approval hit 95%, the highest of any president in history. And then he squandered that approval by going to war against Iraq, a country that had nothing. I mean, we also went to war with Afghanistan, but they actually had something to do with 9/11. But Iraq had nothing to do with it. And it was a
They trumped up the charges. Weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist.
But even still, in that moment where we have to be honest about it, we had unity for maybe about a day or two.
Yeah,
that's when many, like Trump, went on attack of it was Muslims.
Yep.
These individuals we must hate. Many minorities were attacked because of that.
Yes, Sikhs who wear head coverings, who have nothing to do with that part of the world, with any of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're beaten up because they wore head stuff.
Yeah. But that's what ended up happening, right? We had that moment of unity, but then we fell out of it and fell back into our traps and began to really divide even more. And that's the problem. That's another scary sight with Trump. I mean, and you can just take what's going on in Springfield. They are living under basically martial law, like you're talking about, Sasha, because they have bomb threats on a regular basis right now, based on what Trump says. And this is why I don't think society itself can handle another Trump term, is because of, from the first term, he started it, we had all the different riots and everything else, his Charlottesville issues, his George Floyd issues, the women's issues, all the different riots and marches and everything else that were going on during that time. We're forgetting He literally used National Guard members to clear the actual pathway so he could take a photo. He hid in the basement of the White House because people were picketing outside of the White House because of his actions towards what was going on in Minneapolis. And we're forgetting these. That's why a lot of society is forgetting these things. And I can't. It gets frustrating. I'm like,
Well, he's
4
a
years
failure
ago,
as a human being.
yeah, 4 years
Yeah, but
ago,
speaking of-
so much, and then now he's doing the same thing to Springfield and doesn't care. He has no care. He just wants people to riot for him, do whatever they want to for him, as long as they vote. He just wants power, and that's scary.
It's only what's good for him. It always has been. And that's if you just, his dad taught him only losers pay taxes. So he's been avoiding taxes. It's finally caught up with him. They're finally getting to the
Finally caught up with him and everything.
they're convicting him of felonies. And, the Trump University, the Trump organization has been fined massive amounts. So, give one example of how Trump is just a failure as a human being. And he was convicted of sexual assault, and he started to badmouth the person and got fined like $5 million or something like that. Rick will know the numbers. And then he couldn't stop himself. And it ended up being like $80-90 million that he was fined. So,
I've been going on Twitter and telling people, if you're still voting for Trump, you're going to hell. Evangelicals say, well, he's like King David, a flawed human being who became godly. Well, there's no evidence that Trump has ever become godly.
None.
He just keeps giving us more and more proof that he's a huge a-hole.
It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed one bit. But the evangelicals are a problem. He's got the white supremacist vote, and he's got the evangelical vote. He's the most unchristian man that I can say in the public spotlight. And I have no idea how they've gotten their minds so convoluted, except their single issue voting, they're anti-abortion. So I understand that, but there's way too much you have to forgive in order to have that one single issue.
But they're not, they're fake single issue. They like him, but they can't justify him except in the light of abortion.
Well, the way they justify it, which is, it's another detestable thing for me. And this is why I guess certain individuals I get into back and forth with, because it's their idea is that they hate Kamala Harris. They hate, they don't know what she stands for. So I can't stand her and all this. So it goes back to that curve. Trump is sitting here. He's committed. He's been found liable of what the judge said is rape. But yet you're upset at Kamala Harris because of she was a DA. Oh, well, Trump, forget that. Kamala Harris just, she was the border czar and all this other. That's not what she was. I mean, it's like the cognitive dissonance is just.
There's an excuse structure. People who like Trump, everything he does, his negativity, his wildness, his hate, but to justify it to themselves and other people, they have to grab onto certain things that aren't negative in their minds to justify their like of Trump. And abortion's one thing. He says what he thinks. He says what he means. Well, no, he doesn't. He lies all the time.
He lies constantly. But the idea that I think Harris just has to keep playing that pro-choice card, because, Kansas, which is a very red state, voted to put the right for abortion. They stopped the attempts to prevent it from happening. So, you put it to the voters, overwhelmingly, they will support a woman's right to choose. And there are people that are dead set against that. There's no question that's a divide in our country, and it is a difficult issue. There's no coming around that. But I do believe that the majority of Americans do not want the government telling a woman what to do with her body. And it's true for the majority of Americans. And if she plays that card, that rings in Kansas as well as Ohio and other deep red states, that are tremendous. It's a tremendous advantage for her, especially in the swing states. That will motivate more women, and women, we've got to rely on the women, Black women certainly, but women in general, and the suburban women that turned out to vote for Biden, have to show up again. And
non-college educated white males need to get so bummed out that they don't show up.
That's very true.
And I think that honestly, them tying in North Carolina, at least, them tying Mark Robinson to Trump is a good thing, because I think that depresses that vote that you're talking about, Rick, because I think in North Carolina, it is in play now because of Mark Robinson. Yeah. And he said all this stuff before, and Trump knew what he was saying, had heard what he had said, and now you're going to deny it and say, well, no, I didn't really know the dude.
I still have hope for this country. I mean, DeSantis, whatever you can say about him, he was well liked as a governor of Florida, but then he tried to out MAGA, and his approval ratings dropped, and he became a non-factor on the national stage. So I do think that there has been a turning point. This MAGA movement grew. It started with the Tea Party, and then Republicans successfully beat that back and remained the moderate Republicans could still run and get elected. And that when MAGA took over, that was no longer true. They could only nominate far right extremists. And so those are the choices Americans have now between moderate people and extremists. And more and more Americans are choosing moderation. And I think Kamala Harris represents moderation, moderate. And in her case, it's a Democrat, so moderate left. But moderate right is fine. The country doesn't go wrong either way. But extremists in either direction, we have to avoid that. But the Republicans have dipped so far to the right. They're hard right, and those are the candidates that they're putting in front of us now. Mark Robinson is an example, but he's only one of many. And so when they get the idea that they are being rejected across the board, then the Republicans have a chance of coming back to the grand old party that it used to be. And moderate Republicans will have a chance to win primaries and to be elected.
There was a Pew Research study from 2022 that shows that elected Republicans have moved 4 times to the right as elected Dems have moved to the left. So they moved into Looney Town. So
people say that it's a false economy. They say, both sides have crazy.
A false equivalence.
Yes.
The Dems, the Republicans own like 25% of the political landscape in terms of policy. Their policies, they've only won the popular vote in a presidential election once since I want to say 1988.
You said Dems, you meant Republicans.
I mean, Republicans have only won it once out of the past, 9, 10 elections. Their policies are unpopular, but the Dems have a problem, the big tent problem of you've got to hold on to, you don't have to, the most loony left, you're never going to satisfy them. They're going to vote for like Jill Stein or something. But you want to hold on to as much of the far left as you can, and you want to grab the people who lean pretty far right.
Yep.
So you have to give messages of support to that whole range of people, and it's a lot of juggling.
And the tough part, though, just to touch on the false equivalency, I think that false equivalency gets magnified by a lot of the news and stuff like that when they try and do this both sides thing.
Yes, right.
There's not both sides in an issue. For example, when we're talking about the violent rhetoric, that's the huge thing that's out there right now. You had both Biden and Kamala Harris came out. You completely condemn it. Or denounce it. Never do that. It's never welcome. Then you had Trump and Vance come out. Trump came out and said, "Hey, it's them. They should do it. They did it." Vance came out. "Oh, they did it." And can you think about that? There's no two sides to this.
No.
You have really just one side antagonizing, putting out violent rhetoric so heavily that one of my favorite TV shows was Westworld, or at least the first and second season. Third season, crap. But one of the best sayings in there came from Shakespeare. These violent delights have violent ends, and that's what they're doing. So I'm not saying that, oh, well, he brought it on himself. What I'm saying is when you create an atmosphere of hatred and violence, and the only outlet that people see is to do something extreme or angry, and then you try and justify your people doing it by, oh, well, hey, I'll pay for your legal fees. The craziest part to think about, both of those assassination attempts came from people that voted for Trump and are registered Republicans.
Sorry, the dogs are going crazy, but it's stochastic terrorism. We have a country of 1/3 of a billion people. If you say crazy crap, violent crap, statistically, some crazy people are going to respond violently to it. Sorry, I got to go. Nice to see you guys. See you tomorrow.
All right. Yeah, we should wrap up, and hopefully Mark will take us out. But I'll see you later, Chitovi. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, Jim. Yeah, we got to catch up one of these days.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.